welcome to our panel. I'm very, very lucky to have some amazing panelists here. And this is my first time at EWTS, and I have to say, I've been to many AR conferences around the world, and I'm just blown away. Once again, Brian and the team has done an amazing job, and thank you lot for your contribution, insights, and questions. And believe you me, I want you to give these guys some hard questions, okay? I know we're getting towards the end of the day, and everyone's pretty tired about listening to people talk, but I really want you to ask these guys some questions, because these guys know their stuff. Okay, so the agenda is really simple today. We'll be talking about the current state of enterprise augmented reality with some of these leading companies. And then really I want to focus on the barriers to adoption. And there's been a lot spoken over the last couple of days on barriers to adoption. So I'm going to quiz these guys. I want you to quiz these guys as well. And really kind of let's get together so we can understand and start to overcome some of those barriers to adoption. Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit. Who knows of the area or about the area? Hands up, please. Yeah, not as many as I would like, but thank you for the people that do. So I'm doing a shameless plug for a little bit of work about the area, because to be honest, for the people in this room, it's important that we do work together. So the area, as Rika mentioned, we're a global, non-profit, membership-funded alliance looking to accelerate or helping to accelerate the adoption of enterprise AR. We have 54 members around the globe, ranging from enterprises that have deployed AR, including Boeing and Lockheed Martin and Newport News Shipbuilding and many others, to providers that you've all gone and tested their equipment out there, PTC, Upskill, Scope AR, third generation, Mira Labs, and my apologies if I missed anybody out as well, so our members out there. And then we work with non-commercial organizations like government agencies, research institutes. And we try and do four things. One is about thought leadership. There's just not enough information, content out there to allow business decision makers to make informed decisions. So we're focusing on being clear on what the use cases are, what problems can be solved, the case studies, examples of those problems being solved, what technologies are needed, and what's most important is a return on investment. And we've actually created through our research committee an ROI calculator, which the area members are using. Second one is about bringing all the members together to learn from each other. Why are we making the same old mistakes time after time, where we can actually learn and talk in a non-competitive way? Thirdly, educate. We want to get the next set of skilled workers to be able to work in this technology, so working with universities to help define courses. And fourthly, and probably the biggest area at the moment, is reducing the barriers to adoption, which is one of the themes that we're going to be talking about today. So we have a number of committees looking at some of those business issues, security, safety, and I'm honored that Brian, who's the co-chair of the safety committee, is here on the panel today. Requirements, we're developing a single set of requirements. Human factors, and the chair of the human factors here as well. And the research committee. And the research committee allows the members to suggest research. Everyone gets an opportunity to vote on it, and then we go and deliver that research. And we've done a paper on security and wearables. We've done the ROI calculator. We've just delivered a framework on human factors and safety. And then we're doing a new piece of research now, really going into depth in the barriers to adoption in manufacturing with AR. So enough of the plug. If anybody's interested, please come and speak to me. Brian showed the infographic, which I'm going to send to everybody, or Emily will in the next few days. If an opportunity to learn and to understand a bit more what the area's doing in helping all of us in this ecosystem, please come and give me a shout. Shameless plug, that was terrible, wasn't it? Okay, no problem. So, more importantly, let's find out a little bit about our panelists and their experience and the companies they work for. So, if I can, I'm going to start with you, Stephen. Stephen Lewis from Walmart. I know you've spoken a bit about some of the AR initiatives, so if you can explain a little bit about what you're doing and a couple of use cases that you found really important at Walmart.
Sure. So, name is Stephen Lewis. I'm a technical architect at Walmart. So two use cases I could probably highlight real quick. The first one would be in our pharmacy, basically counting pills. Today, we do a lot of manual counting on the trays. Not the most accurate, and it's time consuming, right? So the use case for that is we wanted to be able to take a picture And we use these Zebra TC70Xs for a bunch of things in the stores. So we wanted to reuse hardware we already have, because that's probably one of the biggest hurdles, is getting your infrastructure and your hardware in the place, right? And take a picture, send it to a service, basically count the pills, and there's a lot of algorithms involved there, and then augment reality them so that when they come back, part of the process is the pharmacist has to inspect it to see if it's the right pills, the count's correct, that kind of stuff. So they have to inspect it and then tell the filler that it's okay as well. So that's one of the use cases I'd like to highlight. That was, we did a single store pilot, and that's easy to roll out once we get more of the processes in place around the pharmacy stuff. So that's a very successful and easy one, I would say. As far as like ROI goes. So they're always talking about ROI. So when you can shave, many seconds and increase your accuracy, when you have thousands of stores and pharmacies, it really adds up per year. So that's one use case. Another is one I partnered with the business on for our Sam's Clubs. We call it gift picking. But it's basically for when you order groceries online, we go and send an associate to go pick for you and then bring it to your car, right? So the use case was we wanted to do a hands-free version of that using full augmented reality to show them, like basically guide them to where it is in the club, to pick it, and do it all without scanning any barcodes. And no, we're not using RFID for that either. So barcode scanning, especially on devices like if you're doing an HMT1 or any kind of headset, the cameras aren't that great to do from a distance unless you're using certain type of barcodes. So the deal was we want to use a lot of voice and basically what they see and where they are, using the human component to do that validation and picking quickly. At the same time, using the human component to validate the data. So I don't know how well received it is on the statistics of the accuracy of, I'll just say in retail generally it's like 60-something% accurate for inventory, if your counts are correct, if it's in the right place, things like that. So when I have guidance to send them to a place to go pick, a lot of times your data is just wrong and it's in the wrong place, right? So the idea there is to fix the data. So when they go up to it and say, you know what, this is in the wrong place, it flags the system and then they go find it real quick and it fixes the data. That would be a particular use case that we would want to fix the data. So once your data and foundation's fixed, a lot of applications start working a lot better. So those are two really good examples.
Cool. Just a real kind of quick question. And this is a strange question, but do you give those use cases a name? Not like a project name, but do you say this is this particular use case?
Yeah, so picking is one, right?
Yeah.
Vision picking is typical, right? The other, pill counting.
Okay.
Pill fulfillment,
It's just interesting because a lot of use cases across industries
Oh, yes.
are similar. People quite often ask me what industry is leading in the kind of world, and I say, yeah, actually, it's not the industry, it's the use cases that's quite often similar. So that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Stephen. To a man that needs no introduction, really, but I'm lucky to know Brian Laughlin from Boeing, technical fellow, probably one of the most knowledgeable people I know in this space. Does a hell of a lot for the area and for the ecosystem. Generally, if you've not met or spoken to this guy, you might. It's not that I want to put any pressure for you to meet any more people, Brian, but Brian, if you can perhaps talk about what Boeing about yourself and what Boeing are doing in a couple of use cases, that would be awesome. Thank you.
So I'm Brian Laughlin. I'm an IT architect and a technical fellow for the Boeing company. I've, over my 6-year span at Boeing, I've been I'm a certified sheet metal and composites mechanic. I've been a tool coordinator, a liaison planner, a liaison engineer. I've done a lot of things about the production process, so it's been really helpful to have that kind of a background, because most of the time when I go and try to fix some kind of a problem, I've actually done that job at some point in my career. Probably two of our most outstanding ones, you guys heard a little bit, I talked about it in the presentation yesterday, the human factors, the tanker wiring problem that we had, and that's a very good one to demonstrate the capabilities of AR because of the requirement to actually locate things, a digital asset in the real world. I'll talk a little bit more about the second one, which is we're doing training. We have 2 different contracts with NASA. We're actually doing a return to Mars deep space habitat training, and then we also do International Space Station training. When our astronauts go up there and they do about a 1-year tour of duty in space, when they're getting ready to come back into the atmosphere, that's a year that they've been up there thinking about other things than controlling the module to get back down to Earth. So we're actually using an Oculus, and we have a partnership with Unreal Gaming Engines, which you guys heard a little bit about earlier, and that truly is an Unreal engine. The fidelity is incredible from that particular gaming engine. So we've been working with those guys for about 2.5 years, and we've developed a docking program where they can actually practice docking with the space station, and then also go through the reentry process, and it's very high fidelity. They have a representation of their hands. They can flip all the switches activate, everything acts as if it would in the real world. Kind of following on with that, we've also, and this is my part of my team in BRT Australia, the guys, they do amazing work. Leighton Carr and Knock and a bunch of those guys. The stuff that they're producing is almost AAA game level quality, beautiful renderings and that type of stuff. They've also developed a 737 simulator, flight simulator. One of the things in the aerospace sector, in the next 20 years, we're going to need over 2 billion new employees across the maintenance for the airplanes, the pilots, and then also the flight attendants. And so that's, as you can imagine, that's a tremendous space for training. It's about $173 billion market currently, so very, very high. We actually, through the use of this simulator that Leighton and his team have created, again, very high fidelity, everything works as it should. It's based on the actual CAD drawings for the airplanes. It's not some artist rendition or a cartoon or anything like that. This is the actual drawings we used to build the airplane. You're not going to get a higher fidelity model. We found that we've been able to dramatically cut the cost for training by having the pilots, for example, go and do all their test out training using this simulator, and then they do the final kind of test out on the full motion sims. Full motion sim time costs about $1,100 to $1,500 an hour, so it's very expensive. Plus, they have to co-locate the pilots and all that stuff to have them come to the center to actually do the test outs and whatnot. So we found that we can cut the cost overall for training by well over half. So that's a tremendous value for us and for our airline customers and for the industry at large. And also it'll help us to more quickly fulfill that crushing need that's going to be coming within the next 20 years for that 2 billion new people to help us with the airline industry. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian. I think, again, it's always important to talk about the value, the return on investment, stuff like that. Again, as an ecosystem and as an industry, we've got to continually, I know it's difficult and you're not always allowed to do it, but anything we can do to share real success stories when it comes to pennies and pounds or dollars is important. Okay, I'd like to go over to John from Ingersoll Rand. I know you've been involved in multiple AR projects, so I'd love to get a little bit of your insight in the use cases you've been doing. So if you can give us a couple, that'd be great.
So I'm John DuBay. I'm an electrical engineer by degree, but I quickly moved into what I'd call the connected services and connected solutions space in my career, and have been there probably for the past 20 years. We now call it digital strategies because that sounds cooler, especially when it's on a resume. But it's evolved to that with all the IoT and the wearable technologies. Our use cases are pretty straightforward. Right now, I'm in the HVAC, commercial level HVAC space. We have large chiller plants, very large pieces of equipment on top of buildings for air conditioning. And right now, most of that complex technology has to be serviced by trained certified or trained knowledgeable professionals. If we're disruptive, we can take all this information that's available about how to service this equipment and make it non-proprietary and get it out to anybody who can service our equipment. Now, there's people in our business that say that we have $1 billion worth of revenue and service. Are you gonna make that number get reduced if other people can service our equipment? I go, well, we have or $5 billion of equipment sales. And if we want to raise the equipment sales by a couple billion, let's make it more serviceable by all. As long as it's only serviceable by a small group of people, then people are going to go to products that are more serviceable. So let's make our equipment very serviceable and make people want to buy it more because it's that easily serviced. So we want to take complex information that requires a guy who's $150 an hour and bring it to a guy who's about $40 or $50 an hour and get that entire enterprise of installed base of equipment serviced, so they'll buy more, if that makes sense. So there's a big ROI story about that. The second one is mainly in small retail, which there's, a small retail might be a McDonald's or any kind of small store you can think of, a Starbucks. Doesn't have to be food. It could be clothing. The building automation systems that go into those sites are pretty simple. There's about 4 or 5 rooftops. They're straightforward rooftops. They're not complex. There needs to be a building automation system so you can get data from the equipment, so you can do analytics remotely, you can provide services remotely, you can do scheduling and set point control, you can manage energy usage. But with the large control systems, the effort that it takes an expert to go and put that system in can cause projects to be very expensive, and it doesn't fit the retail space price point. So what we've done is we've taken the ability to put in a building automation system to be very simple by using augmented reality. Let's give people the information to implement one of these, and now what we're doing is instead of deploying again, $150 an hour control specialist, we're just taking the GCs, the general contractor's electrician, and saying, here's the information that you need, and we're going to supplement you remotely to put this control system in, and we're carving off about 50% of the cost of each one of those jobs. So you understand McDonald's and Walgreens and spaces like that have tens of thousands of sites. We can now have a high-end building automation system doing all of the equipment, data collection, providing analytics, all of the controls that are needed for a small space like that, and we can do it with a high-end building automation system at a low cost. So it makes us competitive in that market as well, but more importantly, the ROI for energy usage and energy management is becoming real now because the cost to get the hardware and the labor to get the hardware in there to do energy management has now come down significantly. So those are the 2 primary use cases we have as well as others that we're looking at.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, John. Just a reminder for all the people out in seat land, we want to ask some questions of these guys. So as they're going through and talking about their use cases and some of their challenges, write down your questions, okay? Because it is an opportunity to ask some of these experts. Okay, next, I'm going to go to Probodh from KPIT. Please, I know you lead the digital business, but if you can talk a little bit about KPIT and also use cases, that would be great.
No, thank you, and it's an honor to be with everybody on the stage here. My name is Probodh Chiplunkar, and I look after the digital business at KPIT. We are a systems integrator, and I call it, first, I love what I do. In the digital business, there's always new technologies that are coming out. There's challenges with so many vendors and product companies coming out. So the innovation or the challenge that we see is the opportunity that we can help fulfill in the services business by becoming equipped with bringing things together. And we were talking earlier, one of the things I see in this digital space is kind of a job of a director of a movie set where you get a bunch of artists together for a limited amount of time and you got to figure out how to do it. Usually digital businesses and innovation funds are not unlimited, so you usually have to beg, borrow, steal in many cases and start small. And in that case, you have to have the best, but for a short amount of time with you to work with. So that's what kind of we do, is bring to bear the best of breed, whether it's on the hardware side, whether it's on the communication side, whether it's on the IoT platform side, whether it's on the big data analytics, data science and deaggregation at times, as well as the visualization that can actually do some action out of that analytic that came out. So kind of completing the loop. And the industries that we serve from the vertical standpoint is primarily revolving around manufacturing, whether it's discrete, whether it's life sciences and med devices, whether it's continuous process and some of the industrial customers, as well as automotive and IMC companies. And some of the use cases It's been talked about over the last few days here. I'm sure they're no different. But the two broad categories that I would talk about is in the manufacturing space, when you're in the plant, when you're dealing with technicians and the folks that are running operations, a supervisor or line clearance individual auditors, et cetera. So a few use cases there, and the other is in the service space, which is not alone in service after failure, but also where you want to go service in terms of installation for construction companies, et cetera. So in those two broad categories, we've got several use cases that we can discuss, but I'll just talk about one example of each, which is line clearance and being able to do audit on a shop floor that usually takes several hours and reconciliation between multiple systems over time. With the advent of technology like wearables, the ability for you to bring that data back in and take pictures with voice commands, be able to record video as proof of governance, be able to get that in a workflow so that a supervisor can confirm the change of line. That alone has enough of an ROI, and we've looked at some numbers, especially in the med device pharma space. That's one. The other being electronic work instruction in the manufacturing space, and you've heard a lot about that, where kind of similar to the example you gave as well, which is the ability for you to have the training into the hands of those that maybe cost less. But if you flip the equation a little bit, which is we've got a big amount of retiring or aging workforce, and the new blood that's coming into the manufacturing facilities it has to have this technology to kind of cope up and keep up with. So it's almost a necessity, if you will, today for organizations in manufacturing space to improve the HMI experience, improve the headset experience, improve the digital experience in the plant, which was probably the last place where innovation was coming to typically outside of the machines and controls. So that's one in the manufacturing plant and factory. The other being on the service side, and whether it's a breakdown of an equipment that's a large turbine or an industrial equipment of a silo in a cement factory or a quarry, the ability for a technician to know what kind of fix to make before they can either get up on a ladder from an HSE or health and safety perspective, that's a big risk that you can avoid if you're able to train somebody to do the job with the right tools before they get up, make sure that they are looking at the right type of failure and predict what else can fail. So it's not just the wearable technology, but it's the math of bringing together possibly the parts, possibly the last service and data about how it was serviced, maybe a rotor on top of, or a yaw or a pitch, et cetera, that they need to go fix on a turbine, as well as who's the best possible technician to fix it. This is where AI and other pieces of information come in. So on the service side, equipment failure, hopefully you're able to predict it and prescribe what needs to be done. But at the least, if it's after the fact, you're able to get somebody to be intelligent enough with the right equipment so that there's a safe and a quicker turnaround time to fix that. And then another example in the service industry, which is on installation, kind of the pill packing example that you talked about, which is on a roofing company I know is looking at providing the experience for training for the roofers, and they want to be able to get enough people in the market that can do this. Otherwise, the Hendrix style, now the new bricks or the slate roofs that are coming out, can't be just a handful of roofers that are deploying that. For them to get the product out to market, they have to be able to have critical mass of service technicians be able to do that. So with the ability to do this with technology in a very short amount of time, with either virtual training or augmented feedback on many of the product sets they have, they've been able to create an immense workforce and hence a good reach in the market. So we'll talk about more, but these are the two, I would say, the manufacturing and the service side that we've worked on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Super.
Okay, and last but not least, Ratnadeep from GE Research. So lucky enough, Ratnadeep has a crystal ball. He is looking at the future of augmented reality. But anyway, please tell us about some of the use cases you've been looking at, sir.
Okay, so my name is Ratnadeep and I work in GE Research. And typically where we come in is we have to answer the question, can something be done? So we are kind of where we are the first step into the company where a new technology comes in. And the way we have I have gone through AR is we feel that the main advantage of using AR is to use the critical information to give to our operators when they're doing a critical task. So I call it the 4 R's. It's like the right information at the right location to the right person at the right time. So those are the 4 R's that we feel that build the use case for augmented reality. So within that domain, like we have done a lot of research in different use cases, but since we're short on time, I'll pick 2. One is we have done AR for training our ultrasound technicians. So we have a big GE healthcare business. So one thing that we have noticed that in developing countries or in remote areas in developed countries, there are not enough technicians on call. So when a patient goes to do an ultrasound scan for the heart or the liver, more often than not, more than we care to admit, they do the wrong scan. So we're thinking, okay, can we use AR? It can be a headset, it can be a mobile device. Can we, while the patient is on the bed and the technician, if they're not trained, can the AR system guide them to point the probe at the correct location, at the correct organ, where the organ is supposed to be? So it's easier said than done because, as you know, everybody's body type is different. So you don't know what's the next person is coming, like what, are they tall, short, old, young? And so we are using AI to do some part of that. And then the next question is, okay, the probe, how do you track the probe? Because if you're doing a side scan, then the probe may get occluded by the so you can use AR, you can use optical tracking, you can use computer vision. So those are some of the challenges that we are testing out, and we have done some, like it's been successful so far, and we are kind of moving that needle along and giving it to our healthcare business, and hopefully they are going to make it part of their broader use case. And the second use case that I'm very passionate about is using AR for not for hazard detection, but for once you detect the hazard, how do you give that feedback to the operator when they're working in a very, I would say, toxic environment or a very dangerous environment. So if there is a possibility of, so GE has a lot of installed turbine bases. We work in the oil and gas field. So there are good chances of toxic gases or inflammable gases being leaked. So right now we have sensors that talk to some cloud server or on-prem server, but it sits in the server. So how do you connect the loop back to the operator on the field? You don't want a plant tech manager who's sitting like someplace away to get the notifications, and then by the time they notify the person on field, it's too late. Hopefully it's not too late. So that's where we come in. We're trying to see, okay, can you use AR to connect that loop back and give more information to the worker. So we call that actionable information. So we want to say that, we don't want to give them, say that, oh, hey, 30 ppm of CO2 has been detected. That's useless to an operator on field. We want to give them information that evacuate immediately, leave the place. So those kind of things. So that's again where AI comes into question, because if the sensor is located in an open field, that's a different scenario versus when a sensor is located, the gas leak happens in open field, or a gas leak happens in a closed environment where, let's say, a toxic gas leak has been detected and it's a closed room, there are no windows. That's a different scenario. So we need to know where the sensors are located. So all this infrastructure information, those needs to feed back into the AR device or AR system. So that's where GE research comes in. So I should have told that in my starting of my spiel, but I lead the research in GE. So I work with lead the AR VR research in GE, and I interface with different groups, AI groups, then computer vision groups, healthcare groups. So it's a fun.
Yes.
It's a fun job looking at the future. So.
Fantastic. And his crystal ball's in his back pocket. So 3 quick things. Ratnadeep, you've trademarked the 4 Rs.
Yes.
Okay, so no one else can use that, I would say. The second thing is, with all these kind of great use cases, if there's anyone who knows the people from Gartner, get AR and VR up that blinking curve, because we're out of the trough of disillusionment. And number 3, has anybody got any questions for these people before we start to talk about some of the barriers that they've overcome? Any hands up? Okay, I'll take that as a no. We've got 15 minutes, young men, so we need to rattle through some of these barriers. So one of the things, and we've heard a lot about the barriers to adoption, but it's really important, having heard about some great use cases, to understand what problems you were able to overcome. So I'm kind of going to ask some questions and poke it at some people. So the first one, it does seem, and I've heard a lot of it, companies are focusing on cost cutting, and with so many different kind of technologies available for them, they can make a difference to the bottom line. How do you convince kind of stakeholders and the people using the kind of technology to invest and use AR? And Stephen, that's coming your way, so.
Yes. So it is a difficult thing, the whole dog and pony show, right? So I would say the first thing I would say the best way to get an AR or wearable project through, at least at Walmart, is to have that executive sponsor. But to get that executive sponsor, you have to prove it not just from a technology perspective, but a business perspective. So you normally can't just, not many people have the skills to do both at the same time. So you would partner with someone on the business side. I would be on the technical side. And you could do things like simple as a hack. We do hackathons. You could do bring in third-party products and show it off. But then you have to explain to them how you tie that to like the Walmart integration, the systems, any special hardware. If you want to talk barriers, you could just talk about security all day, right? Yes, it's a thing of nightmares. So what normally you would do is, if you really did want to do like a proof of technology, even before the proof of concept, and get that executive sponsorship, you could go do, you build your prototype, and you can go do it in a live environment, but not hook it into your system. So you can just do static data, things like that, and you get that buy-in. And once you have that buy-in, doors open up a lot better. Yeah. And then you can start having those collaborative experiences with security and all those things. So it's a difficult thing, and that's just one aspect of it. There's a lot of barriers. Yeah, I agree. But you're only that's a big one.
You're allowed to talk about one. So number one, we've talked about stakeholder management, both upwards but downwards as well. And yes. Perhaps we can come to that a bit later on. I'm wary of the time, and I want to get through everybody. So, Probodh, talk about kind of the wearable market's really expanding, and there's options available in kind of hardware, software. What sort of challenges do you see at more of a generic level, and how do you help the customer see the value of the technology? Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think a correlated point to Stephen's point, which is the ROI. I think we have to have a mindset of ROI doesn't need to be the same as it used to be for ERP or large-scale BI or what have you, where 4, 3, 5, 6,000 users are going to get hooked onto the system of record. I think that mindset itself has to change to give the ease to the barrier of entry into an executive buy-in, which is that if 10 technicians or operators, if I can make the bay-to-bin process in a warehouse quicker by X percentage, and if I'm able to prove that. So I just want to take off on that point. But the other area where I see there's a lot of, if you go to the room next door, there's incredible amount of vendors providing technology either from a hardware perspective, either from those providing a software stack to do something to connect the hardware to the rest of the world. And then there are those that are providing just a platform so you can figure out what to do. To me, that's a big challenge, and coming from the, all the way from the good old ERP vendors, all the way into the new age niche players in the market, with the hardware platforms coming in, with IoT platforms and vendors providing a similar thing related to AR, VR on the mobile or your PDA. I think the customers are confused at times as to how to get this kickstarted, even for a proof of concept. I think with the earlier, one of the conversations with the show of hand, the POCs were a lot, but the productionalization was zero. I think that technology choice has to, and this is at the same time when IT management and operations management is getting smarter about this business and technology in general. So everybody's trying to have their own analogy of how to solve this and a stack of technology to solve it. I think if organizations can identify the use case and figure out a very focused return for even a small number of people and pick a stack of technology in the 4 or 5 areas that we had talked about, whether it's hardware, whether it's communications, whether it's IoT, platform to absorb the data, the analytic and the action back to the constituent. I think if we identify, of course, there has to be overarching security, your device management, your DevOps strategy for code management. That's probably more, standard at organizations. But these 5, 6 areas where companies need to really hone down on a technology, and then I think that I see that as the biggest challenge. And once you're over that, and then you start to spit out some use cases, and then hopefully scale not to hundreds, or not to tens of thousands, but at least a few hundred from a deployment standpoint. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's
Sure.
great. So there are kind of situations, physical situations, which creates technology challenges for AI. And quite often, or sometimes, they're not thought about in a kind of design phase, or they come to light in the delivery phase and things like that. John, you were mentioning some of the kind of difficult situations. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences with the technology and how you overcome them?
Yes, so there's a big emphasis on AR because we're trying to get information from some centralized location, which is going to be the cloud, right? Most of the data is going to be in the cloud. And you're trying to drive that information down to an end user on some technology device that's going to help them do exactly what we've been talking about. In the case of Trane, most of the big buildings like this one, there's a good chance that there's a chiller plant a couple floors down, underneath a lot of concrete. So what's happening when I go down with my device? No signal,
Cage.
right? So now my guy's blacked out. I just prevented everything that I was trying to do from happening. So there has to be some planning for that scenario, because I don't even care if you're above ground. I've been places where there's just not good signal. And we're all going to be dependent on some kind of cellular technology for the most part. And one of the approaches that we thought we can take is if you can sync while you have connectivity, whether it be Wi-Fi or cellular, and then have enough of a data set that when you do go in the no signal range, you still get the information you need to do the job. And at the time you're doing the job, you're also saving information, right? Augmented reality is about capturing information about the service that you're providing. Then when you come back above ground and you detect signal, you get to resync and get that data set up to the cloud again. And you may have to go up and down a couple times, but people try to think, well, why can't you just get on the customer's network? And that's obvious. There's security issues. If somebody's coming in with AR technology to service HVAC equipment, IT is not going to jump it through a hoop and go and make sure that that person has connectivity through their business network or through their building network. It would take days, if not weeks, if never. So that's one approach that's one challenge we have that I challenge, the vendors here, the providers here with that all the time, and there are some answers. That approach of getting that data set and syncing before and after is one way to achieve the goal, but make sure that's part of your plan, because that sync has to be part of the design. That information transfer, that is all the information that person needs to do the job, has to be happening both before and after the task when they go into the dead signal zone. That's one of the challenges that we wanted to share with you.
John, that's great. It's really simple, but really important and often overlooked. So thank you for that insight. Throughout this conference and the work of the area that I'm involved in, we know the kind of business challenges and security and safety has been mentioned, but another big one is around human factors. Brian, I know you are a human factors guru and stuff like that. Perhaps you can give us a little bit more insight into some of your work and challenges in human factors.
So it seems like we talked about sponsorship management, return on investment, physical issues potentially with the technology. I'm going to take us inside and talk about feelings, how people feel about this. As humans, we're not very good at change, right? I mean, the old Machiavellian thing rings true that you're only going to have lukewarm support from the folks that would benefit from the change, and you're going to have staunch adversarial resistance from folks who would not. because of the simple fact that the way that things are today is what people are used to. And so if I've spent all this time and investment to become an expert in the way things are today, you're basically eroding my value, is how folks see it a lot of times. So how do you address that? It's really a big problem. Has anybody had that issue? Hands? Yeah, it's hard, especially if we're talking about a unionized type, scenario. A lot of times that confounds it because now we have legalities involved with it as well. So what I found to be very effective in that regard is, and you cannot BS people on this stuff. We have finely tuned detectors, and they will know if you're lying to them. You have to be able to check your pride and your credentials at the door and go to these end users with a sense of humility. And I'm talking about hat in hand and on bended knee. And you need to approach them with a sense of humility and say, look, I need to understand what it is you do. I'm trying to make your life better. We waste a lot of time, a lot of your time, which is an absolute travesty. If I have a heart attack and I'm laying on the surgical table, I want to treat these mechanics and these folks who are doing these jobs more like a surgeon in a surgical theater. When they hold their hand out, that next implement is put in it, and they don't spend an ounce of time focused on where are my forceps, where are my gauze. That implement is put in their hand, and they go to work because I need them utterly and completely focused on fixing the problem, which is my heart in the scenario. Same thing holds true for the kind of folks that we're trying to service in our industry. And we almost have to know their problems better than they do. You have to understand that these folks are very myopic about, they live this stuff day in and day out. And so we have to help them to not to gather or to create requirements, but rather to co-discover them through the process of interrogating what their processes are and helping them to see the kind of things that they do and to strip out all the waste out of those processes and then facilitate those cleaner, leaner processes. And also, by the way, it addresses the ROI problem because I can show you how many days, dollars, steps I've reduced. All these kind of things, I can put numbers to that, and that'll be really satisfactory for your management folks and your finance people. When you go to ask for money, you can say, look, if I gave you $1, would you give me 30 cents of it? That's a pretty easy answer, right? Hard to refuse that one.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Brian. Ratnadeep, we're back to you
Okay.
with your crystal ball still in your pocket. And I know you've been, as well as looking at the future, you're looking at some of the challenges and overcoming that. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about GE and what you've been working on.
Okay, so the way I see it, like there are, of course, as everybody knows, there are a lot of challenges right now in the technology from the hardware sense, from the software. Hardware, most of the AR devices are heavy, they have low battery, they have low field of view. And then from the software side, we have to spend so much time in content creation. So obviously, GE is not a consumer hardware manufacturer, so we partner with, so we do all our tests and then we provide feedback to our hardware partners. And then on the software side, we are trying to use like AI, artificial intelligence, to see if we can kind of know what, from the content creation point of view, if some of the things can be programmed automatically. Like if we are going to create an AR work instruction for 2 different assemblies and they share 90% common parts, we don't need to recreate the whole AR work instructions. But then again, it's easier said than done because those things are difficult. So the question is, how do we learn from what we have done so far and then bring it into the AR workspace? And then the other aspect that I am personally very vexed about is that whenever we talk about AR, we are talking about overlaying virtual information on real objects. But if we don't know where the real object is located, AR does not work. So in our factories, the example that I gave, our ultrasound, the patient is moving, the probe is moving. In our factories, when the engine comes for repair, it's a huge engine, then you have the probe, the persons are moving. People say, okay, we can use computer vision, but you can't see things when they're inside. Computer vision doesn't work when the probe goes inside a turbine blade or something like that. So what do you do in that case? So AR fails. So you can't go to your technician and say, hey, I have an AR device that will work 20% of the time. They'll say, why should I use it? And you are telling me to jump through all these hoops to only do 20%. So those are some of the things that we are trying to figure out from the technology point of view. So the beauty of my job is I don't have to worry about ROI because I'm in the research. So my job is to make sure that it works. And GE is a big proponent of Six Sigma, so we are based on that philosophy. So all our technology has to work all that. We can't give, even we can't have a situation where we are giving the wrong information. That's just not it, because you don't want to have a turbine repair gone wrong or something like that, or a plane engine repair gone wrong. So we have to work on those challenges, which frankly we have not solved it yet. Like not just GE, I have not seen anyone solve those kind of technologies. But we are working on that. Hopefully, we'll catch up to that. So we are the way we are working on that right now, and we have run out of time. Is we are trying to figure out a multi-scale, multi-modal, multi-sensor system that will work in different scales. So, for example, you have radio frequency, you have ultra wideband, you have Wi-Fi, you have magnetic tracking, you have optical tracking. Can you have a system that all of these things work together and then provide the feedback to an AR device? So the AR device kind of becomes the secondary part. All of those things that feed into the AR, that's more important.
Thank you. We got time for a quick question, Jeff? One quick, one really hard quick one, sorry.